Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like every decision you make, every word you speak, every move you take is carefully calculated to avoid disappointing others? You wake up each morning and put on that familiar mask, the one that smiles when you want to scream, nods when you want to shake your head, says yes when every fiber of your being is screaming no. And at the end of each day, when the world finally goes quiet, you're left staring at the ceiling, wondering who you really are beneath all those layers of performance. Maybe you've convinced yourself this is just how life works. That being mature means sacrificing your desires for the greater good. That being loved requires you to become whatever others need you to be. But what if I told you that this endless cycle of people-pleasing isn't just exhausting your soul? It's slowly killing the most authentic parts of who you are. Carl Jung, one of the most revolutionary minds in psychology, understood something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. He knew that the greatest tragedy isn't failing to please others. It's failing to listen to the voice within you that has been trying to guide you home to yourself. Jung called this voice many things, but at its core, it represents something that our modern world has taught us to fear, to silence, to ignore, until it becomes nothing more than a whisper we can barely hear. This isn't another self-help video promising you easy answers or quick fixes. This is about something far more dangerous and far more necessary. It's about the courage to stop living as an actor in someone else's play and finally becoming the author of your own story. Because here's what nobody tells you about people-pleasing. It's not kindness, it's cowardice. It's not love, it's fear. And it's not making you a better person. It's making you disappear piece by piece until one day you wake up and realize you've become a stranger to yourself. But there's a way out. There's a path back to who you really are. And Jung mapped it out for us, though few have the courage to follow it. The question is, are you ready to stop betraying yourself for the comfort of others? Are you ready to discover what happens when you finally choose your inner truth over external approval? If you've made it this far, it's not by accident. Something inside you recognizes the urgency of what we're about to explore. So let's begin this journey. But I'm warning you now, once you understand what Jung discovered about the human psyche, you'll never be able to live unconsciously again. You'll start seeing the invisible chains that have been binding you, and more importantly, you'll learn how to break them. The modern world has turned us into professional performers. From the moment we're born, we're trained to read the room, to sense what others want from us, to mold ourselves into shapes that earn approval, love, acceptance. We learn that crying too loud gets us ignored, that asking for too much gets us rejected, that being ourselves might cost us everything we think we need. And so we develop what Jung called the persona, this elaborate costume we wear to navigate the social world. The persona isn't inherently evil. It serves a function. It helps us get along with others, maintain relationships, function in society. But here's where the danger lies. Most people become so identified with their persona that they forget it's just a mask. They start believing that this performance is who they really are. You see this everywhere. The person who's always the helper, never able to say no, drowning in everyone else's problems while their own life falls apart. The one who's perpetually agreeable, nodding along to opinions they secretly despise, slowly losing their voice until they can't remember what they actually believe. The individual who's constantly scanning the room for approval, adjusting their personality like a thermostat based on who's watching. Jung saw this clearly. He understood that when we live entirely through the persona, we become cut off from our authentic self, from our deepest truths, from the very source of our vitality and creativity. We become what he called unconscious, sleepwalking through life, reacting instead of responding, following scripts written by others instead of authoring our own existence. But here's what makes this particularly insidious in our current age. We live in a world that rewards this unconsciousness. Social media platforms are designed to turn us into approval-seeking machines, constantly performing for likes, shares, comments. Our education system teaches us to give the answers that teachers want to hear, rather than developing our own capacity for critical thinking. Our workplaces often punish authenticity and reward conformity. The result is an epidemic of people who feel empty, anxious, depressed, but can't understand why. They're doing everything right according to external standards, yet something fundamental is missing. That something is the connection to their inner voice, their authentic self, their soul. Jung believed that each of us carries within us a wisdom that transcends anything we can learn from books, experts, or authorities. He called this the self with a capital S, not the small ego self that worries about what others think, but the deeper self that knows who we are and what we're meant to become. This self speaks to us constantly, but we've learned not to listen. Think about the last time you felt truly alive, truly yourself. I'm willing to bet it wasn't when you were trying to please someone else or performing for approval. It was probably when you were doing something that felt authentic to you, when you forgot about how you looked or what others might think, when you were simply being rather than performing. That feeling, that sense of aliveness, that's your inner voice calling to you. It's trying to guide you back to yourself, back to a life that feels real rather than rehearsed. But listening to it requires something our culture has taught us to fear: the willingness to disappoint others. This is where most people turn back. They hear the call of their authentic self, they feel the pull toward a more genuine way of living, but then they remember all the people who might be upset, disappointed, angry if they change. They think about the relationships that might shift, the expectations they might not meet, the image they might have to abandon, and so they make the trade. They choose the temporary comfort of approval over the lasting satisfaction of authenticity. They choose the familiar prison of people-pleasing over the unknown freedom of self-trust. But here's what Jung understood that most people don't. This trade isn't sustainable. Eventually, the suppressed authentic self will demand to be heard. It might show up as a midlife crisis, as depression, as anxiety, as a vague sense that something is fundamentally wrong with your life, even when everything looks perfect on paper. It might manifest as physical symptoms, relationship problems, career dissatisfaction, or a general feeling of being stuck. These aren't signs that something is wrong with you. They're signs that your authentic self is trying to break through the layers of conditioning and performance. The question isn't whether your inner voice will eventually demand to be heard. It's whether you'll listen to it voluntarily or wait until it forces itself to the surface through crisis and breakdown. Jung believed that we all face this choice eventually. Continue living unconsciously according to others' expectations, or begin the difficult but ultimately liberating process of individuation, of becoming who we really are. This process isn't easy. It requires us to question everything we've been told about who we should be, what we should want, how we should live. It means potentially disappointing people we care about, letting go of identities that no longer serve us, facing parts of ourselves we've kept hidden. But it's also the only path to genuine fulfillment, to a life that feels truly our own. In the next part of this exploration, we'll dive deeper into what Jung discovered about the forces that keep us trapped in unconscious living, and more importantly, how we can begin to break free. We'll explore the specific mechanisms by which the world programs us to ignore our inner wisdom and the practical steps we can take to reconnect with our authentic voice. The moment you decide to stop living for others' approval, you'll discover something terrifying. Most people around you have no idea who they really are either. They're just as lost, just as disconnected from their authentic selves, just as trapped in the endless cycle of performance and validation. And when you start to wake up, when you begin to question the rules of the game everyone is playing, you become a threat to their comfortable unconsciousness. Jung understood this dynamic deeply. He knew that the unconscious masses have a vested interest in keeping everyone asleep, because your awakening forces them to confront their own slumber. When you stop automatically agreeing, stop reflexively accommodating, stop being the reliable people pleaser they've come to depend on, something shifts in the entire system around you. Suddenly, the people who claim to love you for who you are reveal that they only loved you for what you provided them. The relationships built on your willingness to shrink yourself begin to crack. The identities you've worn like comfortable old clothes start to feel suffocating. And in that discomfort, in that friction, you'll be tempted to go back to sleep, to return to the familiar patterns of self-betrayal. But here's what Jung discovered through his own journey and his work with thousands of patients. This discomfort is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're finally doing something right. The resistance you feel, both from within and from others, is proof that you're touching something real, something authentic, something that threatens the false structures that have been holding your life together. This is where most people give up. They interpret the discomfort as evidence that they should retreat back into their old patterns. They mistake the growing pains of authenticity for signs of failure. They allow the voices of others to drown out the quiet whisper of their inner wisdom. But Jung saw this differently. He understood that this resistance is actually the guardian at the threshold of your true self. Think of it like this. Imagine you've been living in a house with all the curtains drawn, all the windows sealed shut. You've grown accustomed to the dim light, the stale air, the cramped feeling of living in shadows. Then one day, you decide to open a window. The fresh air rushes in, the sunlight streams through, and suddenly you can see clearly for the first time in years. But that sudden brightness hurts your eyes. The fresh air feels overwhelming after breathing stale air for so long. Your impulse might be to close the window, to return to the familiar darkness. This is exactly what happens when you begin to live more authentically. The contrast between your old unconscious way of being and your emerging authentic self can feel jarring, uncomfortable, even frightening. Your inner voice doesn't speak in the language of comfort and convenience. It speaks in the language of truth, growth, and sometimes necessary disruption. It might tell you to leave a job that pays well, but kills your soul. It might urge you to end a relationship that looks good on paper, but feels empty inside. It might call you toward a path that makes no logical sense, but feels deeply right in your bones. Jung called this voice the self, and he distinguished it clearly from the ego. The ego is the part of you that wants to be liked, accepted, safe, comfortable. It's constantly calculating how to maintain your image, how to avoid conflict, how to keep everyone happy. The self, on the other hand, is concerned with wholeness, authenticity, growth, and truth. These two forces within you are often at odds. The ego whispers, "What will people think? What if they reject you? What if you're making a mistake? Stay safe, stay small, stay acceptable." The self calls, "This is who you really are. This is what you're truly meant to do. Step into your full power, even if it scares everyone around you, including yourself." Most people spend their entire lives listening exclusively to the ego, mistaking its voice for wisdom, its fears for legitimate concerns, its need for approval for love itself. But Jung discovered that real psychological health, real fulfillment, real peace comes from learning to distinguish between these voices and choosing to follow the deeper wisdom of the self. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or inconsiderate. It doesn't mean ignoring the legitimate needs of others or abandoning your responsibilities. What it means is learning to act from a place of authentic choice rather than unconscious reaction. It means saying yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. It means showing up as who you really are rather than who you think others want you to be. But here's the challenge. Your inner voice has been buried under years, maybe decades of conditioning. It's been drowned out by the constant noise of other people's expectations, social media, advertising, cultural programming, family dynamics, and your own internalized critic. Learning to hear it again requires practice, patience, and most importantly, the courage to sit with uncertainty. Unlike the ego, which offers quick answers and familiar solutions, the self often speaks in whispers, in hunches, in feelings that can't be easily explained or justified to others. It might guide you toward decisions that don't make logical sense, but feel intuitively right. It might ask you to trust something you can't prove, to follow a path you can't fully see, to become someone you've never been before. This is why Jung emphasized that the journey toward authenticity is ultimately a spiritual journey, not just a psychological one. It requires a kind of faith, not in any particular religion or doctrine, but in the wisdom of your own deepest nature. It requires trusting that there's something within you that knows better than your conscious mind what you need for genuine fulfillment. The path Jung outlined isn't about perfection or achieving some final state of enlightenment. It's about the ongoing process of becoming more conscious, more authentic, more aligned with your true nature. Some days you'll listen to your inner voice clearly. Other days you'll get caught up in old patterns of people-pleasing and lose yourself again. This isn't failure. It's part of the process. What matters is developing the capacity to notice when you've drifted away from yourself and the skill to find your way back. It's about building a relationship with your inner wisdom that becomes stronger and more reliable over time. It's about learning to trust yourself even when, especially when, that trust challenges everything you've been taught about how to live. The world will not applaud this journey. In fact, it will often resist it. People who profit from your unconsciousness, who benefit from your people-pleasing, who feel comfortable with the predictable version of you, will try to pull you back into your old patterns. They'll use guilt, manipulation, threats of abandonment, accusations of selfishness. This is not because they're evil, but because your growth threatens their own comfortable unconsciousness. Jung understood this resistance intimately because he faced it himself when he chose to break away from Freud's established theories. When he dared to trust his own insights over the accepted wisdom of his time. He knew that choosing authenticity over approval would cost him professionally, socially, personally. But he also knew that the alternative was spiritual death, a slow suffocation of everything that made him truly alive. This is the choice that stands before you now. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances align perfectly, but right now in this moment. Will you continue to betray yourself for the temporary comfort of others' approval? Or will you finally honor the voice within you that has been patiently waiting for you to remember who you really are? Here's what Jung discovered and what you need to understand. Your inner voice isn't asking you to be perfect. It's not demanding that you transform overnight or that you never make mistakes. What it's asking for is your attention, your respect, your willingness to listen even when what it says makes you uncomfortable. Start small if you need to. Notice the moments when you automatically say yes, but feel no inside. Pay attention to the times when you smile but want to cry, when you agree but actually disagree, when you perform but long to simply be. These moments of awareness are the beginning of your liberation. Your inner voice might tell you to take 5 minutes of silence before responding to that demanding text message. It might urge you to speak your truth in a conversation where you usually stay quiet. It might whisper that you need to step away from that friendship that drains your energy, or that job that crushes your spirit, or that version of yourself that you've outgrown. The courage to follow this guidance doesn't come from feeling fearless. It comes from recognizing that the cost of not listening, the price of continued self-betrayal, has become greater than your fear of change. It comes from understanding that disappointing others is temporary, but disappointing yourself is a wound that never fully heals. Jung's message is both challenging and liberating. You are not here to live up to anyone else's expectations. You are not here to be the person your parents wanted you to be, or the employee your boss prefers, or the friend who never causes problems, or the partner who never asks for too much. You are here to become yourself, fully and completely, regardless of whether that makes others comfortable. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or selfish or indifferent to others' well-being. True authenticity, Jung discovered, actually makes you more capable of genuine love and connection because you're no longer desperately seeking from others what you're not giving to yourself. When you stop abandoning yourself, you stop unconsciously resenting others for not filling the void that only you can fill. The journey back to yourself is the most important work you'll ever do. It's more important than your career, your reputation, your social media following, your need to be understood or approved of by people who don't even understand or approve of themselves. Because at the end of your life, you won't be asking whether you pleased enough people or avoided enough conflict or maintained enough comfortable illusions. You'll be asking whether you had the courage to live as yourself, whether you listened to the voice that knew who you really were, whether you chose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, your inner wisdom over the world's expectations. Jung spent his life showing us that this choice is always available to us. In every moment, in every interaction, in every decision, we can choose to honor our authentic nature or betray it for temporary external rewards. The path is clear, even when it's difficult. The voice is there, even when it's quiet. The question that remains is simple but profound. Will you finally stop pleasing the world and start obeying your inner voice? Will you choose the courage to disappoint others in service of honoring yourself? Will you trust that the wisdom within you knows better than the fear around you? Your authentic self is waiting. It has been waiting your entire life, and it will continue to wait patiently and lovingly until you're ready to come home to who you really are. The time is now. The choice is yours. And the voice that will guide you through it all is already speaking. You just need to finally listen.